Howdy, folks. Welcome to my Retro Media Room. Today, I want to take a special look at this 1997 Electronic Gaming Monthly Player's Guide to the Nintendo 64 for a few reasons. The first reason, this is the very first magazine I ever bought as a kid off of the impulse buy rack at Walmart. And the second reason is a deeply personal and important reason that this magazine, that I've kept this magazine over the years and why it's so important to me. But I need to give some context to that. And to get to know me a little bit, let me tell you about my upbringing and what led to me being a gamer like I am and a collector. So I'm the youngest of four siblings, grew up in small town Oklahoma, born in the 80s. So I grew up all throughout the 90s and 2000s. And my two oldest brothers, and I also have an older sister, but our two oldest brothers, they grew up, they were born in the 70s. So the first system they had was a Commodore 64 and then the Atari 2600. I believe in that order, maybe the other way around, but either way. The Commodore wasn't working by the time I was 4 years old, which is as far back as I can remember. Never got to play the Commodore 64 originally. I only have a C64 Mini. But the Atari 2600 that we got, once again, before I was born, when my brothers were little, that was a Sears Edition Arcade 2, which is an Atari 2600 all the same, but it was a Sears model. Atari used to let other manufacturers make consoles for them, so it was kind of a weird. It was kind of weird the way Atari was not like Nintendo. That's why Nintendo succeeded better, because Nintendo had strict controls over their manufacturing, whereas Atari was loosey goosey about it, and that was part of their downfall. So anyway, so by the time I was 4 years old, as far back as I remember, not only did we have that Atari from back when they were kids, but then we also ended up getting a Nintendo not long after it launched. So we had Punch Out, Russian Attack, Top Gun, Double Dribble, and so on. So those are the games that I played. Those are the earliest memories I have, are playing that and a little bit of Atari. Although the Atari barely worked on any TV because of that little TV cable RFU adapter box switcher. Oh my God, that thing was terrible adapter, and it barely ever worked. You all know what I'm talking about for any of you old enough to remember those. So thankfully, you never need to use that again. So by the time I was 4 years old and playing the Nintendo and becoming familiar with that, by the time I was four, almost five or so, it stopped working, which was pretty common for original Nintendo model systems. They had a tendency to just die and stop working. So for about a year there, from about 5 years old to almost 6 years old, I didn't have any games to play other than a little bit of the Atari, but it was so frustrating to work, I just didn't bother. So for about a year there, I had no games whatsoever, and for a while, got somewhat used to not having it except for friends' houses. But then Christmas of 92 rolled around after I turned 6, and we got the Super Nintendo, specifically the Super Nintendo packed with Super Mario World. So that was super exciting. I was thrilled. And that's when my journey, that was my first console, even though it was really for my sister and I, but really kind of turned into my console because I was really the main one who stuck with it over time. So that's when my journey really started with video games, was the Super Nintendo. And of course, the Nintendo I kept, and to this day I have collected everything we have for the Nintendo. I kept, continued to play later. Got a top-loading Nintendo later on, years later, I saved up for, and then continued to play those games. But in that Super Nintendo, I actually physically restored it to its original type of box, because that same Super Nintendo from that Christmas and that game I recompleted in another nice condition box. So it now sits on my display shelf, completed and retired. So very cool there. So some additional context I need to add here was that before I even got the Super Nintendo for that Christmas, at 5 years old, I'd been in kindergarten for a mere few months, and my mother decided to pull me out because she decided to homeschool me. Now, normally I wouldn't criticize homeschooling. Homeschooling can be a very good thing if done correctly, but in my case, it was not done correctly. As the years went on after that, I became academically neglected. So the last thing she taught me, when I was like around 9, she taught me division. And the last thing she had me reading was Dr. Seuss, from what I remember. And so I wasn't progressing. I wasn't getting much better. Tried Hooked on Phonics. Did absolutely nothing for me. Was not interested. So it continued to be a problem, to the point where On my 9th birthday, I was too self-conscious to attempt to read out loud my birthday cards, so I handed them to my friend to read for me.
There you go.
Yeah, that way now, that's good.
I can't read though.
You want me to read to you?
Steven,
Has a special spout
you
and thinks
just
it's
read
well
slow.
fun.
While my dad laughed it off, not realizing that I was actually being serious. He thought I was just being a kid joking or whatever, but no, I was actually being very honest about the situation. So it was a struggle, and it was a struggle for a long time. I was way below where I was supposed to be at my age. Now, summer of '97 rolls around. One day, my brothers surprised me with a Nintendo 64 and a copy of Turok, because I had been super excited for the 64 before that, playing it at the store. My cousin brought his over one time, so I really wanted a 64. So it was an early birthday present. Was super stoked for it. And about a week, or maybe 1 week, maybe 2 weeks later, after getting it finally, I was with my mom at Walmart, which for us was like almost an hour. It was like an hour round trip to go to Walmart because we're small town Oklahoma. On the magazine rack next to the register, there was this magazine right here. Now, I honestly was not able to quickly read the title and everything it was about. I just saw the picture of the Nintendo 64. That was all it took. I saw the 64 on the cover. I'm like, I gotta have that. So I asked my mom if I could get it. She said sure. We bought it, took it home. For over the course of time, I absolutely made it my mission to read this entire magazine front to back over the course of time. So as I'm playing the 64, renting games, beating games, playing games, and reading this, even though it was a slow process and it was over time, and then I started subscribing to other video game magazines, anyone I could get a hold of, and about 6 months later, and a PlayStation and a stack of magazines later, I was reading at high school level. By the time I was 10 years old, I was reading much, much better than I ever thought possible, because I was reading. I was finally deeply interested in something that I was determined to read. And I remember waking up one day, or as I was playing something or reading something, like one of my magazines, I was like, wait a minute. It just occurred to me, this isn't hard anymore. I just do it. So video games literally saved my life, because I couldn't read very well, and it was a struggle, and I was always behind everybody, and the friends I had at church, I was always embarrassed how I was always not like them. Not every way I was worried about being different. I didn't mind being different so much, but in that regards to being different, being behind, it was very embarrassing, and I was self-conscious about it. And video games helped me overcome that. So this is interesting here. So that's why this magazine is special to me, because this magazine kicked off my journey of not only with video games, but this was my personal hooked on phonics, and this magazine helped me learn to read, because I was so determined to read it. On top of playing games with dialogue and text and everything else, I was determined to read the dialogue and know what's going on in the game and understand the games, right? So I just powered my way through it. So I thank God for that, and it was a blessing. So I want to make a point that every game in these reviews here, every single game in these reviews, I own now. And that was another thing I made it a point to have. I made it a point to have every reviewed game from this magazine, of all these, because exclusively this is covering Nintendo 64 games. So wow, 9.5 Star Fox 64. I don't disagree. It's funny, they only gave the sound a 7, everything else a 9. That's interesting. Hexen 7.5 sounds about right. From what I understand, this is the superior console port as far as Hexen goes. I remember International Super Soccer being like, I mean, look at the ratings they give it, like gameplay and fun factor 10. This was like the quintessential soccer game when that came out. Now, Dark Rift, it's funny what I've seen of this. It's not like a fantastic fighting game, but it is one of the few Nintendo 64 games that has 60 frames per second. So quite interesting. I haven't played it yet. That could be a first impressions video. Ah, War Gods, such fun cheesiness. The arcade was fun. The Nintendo 64 version is interesting, of course. Yeah, I like War Gods in a nostalgic, cheesy way. It's a lot of fun. Now, Doom 64 is a classic. Now I always disagreed with their rating here. Uh, Much too low of a rating. Doom 64 is easily one of the best Dooms, and playing it on current consoles now is fantastic. And or it was either International Super Soccer or FIFA Soccer 64. I forget. No. It was International. That was like almost a 10. This one they didn't care for as much. This is the inferior. So this is from EA. Yeah. So the EA title was the one that did not fare so well. Blast Corps, fun game. I didn't play it a whole lot originally. I rented it like one time, but certainly a fun game. Ah, Torok. Yes. For me, oh man, at the time, this is a 10 out of 10, for me, Torok at the time. So, but fair rating. Graphics 9, I agree. It was mind blowing at the time. And Mario Kart 64, man, my favorite Mario Kart of all time to this day. Absolutely. NBA Hang Time, which is pretty much NBA Jam. I just got it recently. I've actually never played it, but I'm sure it's fun because NBA Jam is a lot of fun. So, Shadows of the Empire. It's not a perfect game, but it certainly has some really cool segments, and it's some timeless segments that are classic in Star Wars games. Cruising USA, fun arcade game. I love the arcade game with the steering wheel and everything, but I remember the 64 version got bashed pretty hard. Now for Killer Instinct Gold, I think that's too low of a rating. Killer Instinct Gold was fantastic. I love Killer Instinct Gold. Let's see, Wayne Gretzky's 3D Hockey. I remember that being pretty well regarded. Mortal Kombat Trilogy. My understanding, the 64 version is not bad. It's actually pretty good. It's not the Sega Saturn, but it's pretty good. So I think that's probably a little low, honestly. I think they're being a little bit harsh on it. Oh, Wave Race. I agree with this rating. Wave Race is fantastic. Absolutely love Wave Race. To this day, there's not a jet ski game as fun as Wave Race. Pilot Wing 64, interesting game. Of course, Pilot Wing started on Super Nintendo. Super Mario 64, of course, can't argue with that score. It was a game changer. It was an absolute game changer. So I remember always seeing this set. This was before flat screen, actual like LCD or plasma or anything. So this looked wild back in the day. That's Project Overkill on PlayStation. The picture there is very interesting. Got the different peripherals and controllers here. Very cool. I didn't really have any of these extra special controllers that I remember. Nah, just standard stuff. Let's see. The 64DD. Now, this thing, of course, never came out in North America. It never made it out of Japan. And, of course, there's prototypes and Japanese copies that people have collected. And the story behind it's very interesting. So I'll have to read this again sometime and check it out. Because this is that was a really interesting. It was all hyped up and going to happen, and it was the big part about it was that Zelda was still in development, Ocarina of Time, and that was going to be a part of it, but didn't come to North America, and they ended up just doing the expansion pack for later games. So very interesting. 64s, yeah, they talk about it, preview it, compare it to stuff. Failures from the add-on past. See, I like these historical articles here. So they talk about these Sega CD, 32X, which I did have. Still don't have a Sega CD. I would like to have one, and I would like to have a Jaguar. So, but I do have the 32X. That's very cool. Star Fox 64. Oh yeah, strategy. Star Fox 64 is such a good game. Absolutely good game. I still love the first one. First one's my favorite. The 64 is great. Ooh, see, it's funny how Star Fox 2, they mention it here. They talk about it now on the Super NES Mini. The SNES Mini. You can play it in its entirety on that. So that was so exciting to be able to finally play a complete version, officially released version of it on the Super Nintendo Mini. because I heard about it for so many years and how it. I remember, you know what? I actually saw commercials for it on TV when I was a kid, anticipating it coming out. Then it got canceled. It's crazy. But then we got Star Fox 64, so people forgot about it. Some did. Yep. Strategies. Yep. Strategies. Blast Core. God, the layout of this magazine. This is a lot of work when you think about it. I miss magazines. These were. Like I said, these magazines are why I'm able to read to this day. I mean, now I have a college degree, so I have a bachelor's degree. So never thought that would happen. That's for sure. Oh, Doom 64 strategies and maps. Very cool. Mario Kart. I definitely learned some course shortcuts from this. Yep, some Torok. So I got a lot of information for the games as I was playing them at the time from this magazine, for sure. And the cheat codes. Yep, I remember the dolphin trying to get the dolphin. Oh yeah, see, oh man, see these Torok cheat codes. I use these. I absolutely use those. I got a lot of stuff out of this magazine because the 64 was still brand new for me, and using these strategies and cheat codes and different things. Oh man, I got a lot out of this magazine. This is a lot. This is all in one package right here. Previews. So we got Clay Fighter 63 and a third. Interesting, very interesting fighting games. They're very weird, and not always great, but very interesting games. Top Gear Rally, very cool racer. I have that now as well. Oh, see, this was when I was first stoked. I was super because I've been playing Duke Nukem on PC along with Doom 2. And when I first saw that Duke Nukem was coming to 64, I was super excited because I had to turn on the parental controls to take the violence out of it, the adult content out of it, and so the 64 version, I've found out that they were going to clean up the adult content, but just leave the gore in. And I was, as a kid, I was like, oh man, I can play it, actually just play it and enjoy it. Of course, GoldenEye is absolute classic. All these games. Oh yeah. See. So Mission Impossible. This is a great example of look how high res and clean Mission Impossible and detailed Mission Impossible looks, right? Like these visuals, like this image right here, especially in this image, impossible on the 64. So this is back when, and they still do it somewhat, when these previews for games showed a completely fictional picture of what a game was going to look like on said console. And I remember Mission Impossible. I was like, oh man, that looks incredible. Does not look like that in the final product. Most of these are not doing that though. Most of these, because those are obviously early screenshots, but most of these are actually, they look just like the game looks. Quarterback Club 98, played the crap out of that. Oh man, F1. This is what my friend Mike. If I remember right, this is the game that his parents got him for the first game he got on the 64, and he was pretty bitter about that because it was not a great game when there's all these other great games you want. Yoshi's Island 64, good game. I don't remember Multi Racing Championship very much. Body Harvest, Space Station. I actually do have Body Harvest, yeah. Aero Fighters, very cool game. I have that. Played it back in the day, and I have it now. Oh yeah, the name changed. It's just Troublemakers, I think. Very interesting platformer. I may or may not have it. I can't remember, but I played it. Bomberman, of course, Legend of Zelda. Dude, look at these. Look at these early screenshots of Ocarina of Time. This was like alpha build, right? Like none of this is in the final game. Like this is completely different. Early build, very interesting, and that's when they were planning on it releasing alongside the 64 DD. So very interesting. Mystical Ninja 64. Wild Choppers, Rev Limit. Extreme G. Earthbound 64. I can't even remember what happened to that. Huh. I'll have to look it up. Castlevania 64, man, look how wild that looks. It was funny. This bizarre when you think about it, but this female model was seemingly naked or naked-ish, and my sister drew over it. What's this, kids? The final game looks nothing like that. Absolutely nothing like that. The final game was not great. Interesting, but not great. Certainly not to the standard that the Castlevania had previously. So, all right, that's and a War Gods ad on the back. So yeah, that was this magazine. I appreciate anybody who watched the whole thing to hear my story of how video games really saved me as a kid at learning how to read and where I started my journey. Now I have other stories. There's many more systems to cover that from my childhood and how I got them and you know, first experiencing them and everything else. But those will be for future videos. I hope you all enjoyed this content. And if you want to know more about me or want me to talk more about some of my history with past with past consoles and games, I'll certainly be happy to go to show them and talk about them. And I wish I had more home videos of that stuff, but well, what little I had, I've pretty much shown. So, all right, thanks for watching, and I hope you all have a great day.